Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we travel to the Bermuda Triangle in search of missing RPGs. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. I feel like we kind of have this Sunday morning, political talk show energy going. It's a real Algonquin circle between the two of us right now.
Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my
little
co-host,
NPR here,
Mark Mitchell. Sometimes the vibes need to change. I didn't commit to it though. I started with a very mellow, and then it was like, that's not the energy of the show. The energy of the show is a little bit more bombastic. We settle into a Sunday morning groove.
I liked it though. It's like switching things up, keeping things fresh, keeping the listeners on their toes. Hopefully, nobody was driving along
and immediately fell asleep. This and this is something that now when I reflect on it, it makes me feel like I was being more of a jerk than I thought I was at the time. But something that I used to like to do when I was doing plays in high school and college was just do one thing kind of different in a sort of big way, just on every performance, and just to have it be a little bit more spontaneous or whatever. But I'm also certain that it freaked some actors out. Right? That I would wait a little bit longer to come out or, whatever. And someone's blood pressure was
What was your favorite play that you ever did? Play or musical?
Oh, I think favorite musical I ever did was Wendy McLeod's The House of Yes, which is just I don't know that I can describe the play on this show.
You did this in high school?
No, I did it in college.
Oh, okay.
And we did it in so it's a story of two twins who are sleeping together but have grown up in this house, and they do sexual role play around the Kennedy assassination. and it's messed up. But we did it in an immersive house theater environment. So it wasn't in a theater, it was in a house. So people were just around watching this thing unfold. And it's it's an upsetting, the subject matter is upsetting, and it's even further upsetting when you're just there in the house while it's happening. But it's a great show. It was made into a movie at one point with Parker Posey and Freddie Prinze Jr. And it's great.
I've never heard of this ever, and I'm a big Freddie Prinze Jr. head.
Mark, I know this about you. What are we talking about? Less upsetting, my copy of Sonic Forces. Would you like to borrow it? You can certainly get on a list to do so. All you gotta do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society
at gmail.com
and give us a mailing address so we can send you my copy of Sonic Forces. Do not send it to that forbidden House of Yes. I send you my copy. You play it for as long as you want. You send it back. I pay for postage both ways. It's the perfect borrowing program.
It is the perfect program. Another thing you can do is you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate it so much. If you leave us a 5-star review on the U.S. Apple Podcast Store, we'll give you a shout out on the show because we can see that you did so. If you leave us a review anywhere else, we still really appreciate it, but we can't tell that you did. So send us an email, hit us up on Twitter, let us know, and we'll give you a shout out.
And we are working on the technology to see when you leave us 5-star reviews.
The best people are on it.
We have top men on it.
Will this be incredibly invasive to your privacy?
Yes.
Possibly.
No, I'm going to say yes.
It's a guarantee.
Don't soft pedal it, Mark. It's a guarantee. But we want to give those shout outs.
Right.
But you can just let us know when you've done that.
It's easier that way.
Don't have to invade your privacy. All right, Mark, let's get into our topic at hand. Let's discuss some RPGs that haven't made it to Switch yet. before we like dig into what those like what games we have brought to the table that we want to see come to Switch, that's the idea here, right? Games that we want to see. Um, let's just talk about like kind of why we're doing this, right? And I think we were sort of clued into like, hey, old RPGs are coming to Switch. It's been happening for a little while, but Chrono Cross is sort of like the big one that made us go like, hold on, this is like a thing.
Well, it's exciting.
It's a movement. Well, yeah, also that it's exciting. But we've got this. We've got Live Alive coming out in July. Nintendo just announced that the release date of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is like 4 months earlier as they move it from September to July as well. But just, the Switch has like
That's 2 months, right?
September, July, August. 2 months, yep. But these aren't the only. Xenoblade is a new RPG, obviously coming to the system. But we have so many sort of classic RPGs that are showing their face on Switch, right? We've got the first 3 Dragon Quest games. We've got Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-2, 12. Obviously the aforementioned Chrono Cross. And the Saga games all were collected at one point. The Seiken Densetsu, Secret of Mana games, all collected over there. There's just a lot of these games, but not all. Mark, not all of these games. Do you have any like overarching, like are there games that came that you thought would be fun that you have just not picked up, or like what is your relationship to classic RPGs as it pertains to them being on Switch?
Man, I am really glad that there are so many on Switch. I wish I had more time. Like, I genuinely would like to go back to Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah.
And give it another shot, like really put some time into it.
Well, especially because the version that's on Switch right now is the one that's on like all the other modern platforms, which is it's not a remake, but it is like a more aggressive remaster than the 7 and 9, the versions of 7 and 9 that are also on the platforms.
And like with a lot of these, they add some optional quality of life features, like you can speed up the battles, or you can turn off random encounters, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which also would
and like
be
level up
way.
Stuff where like you just get a bunch of experience points, or you're just more powerful in battles or whatever.
Yeah, which can kind of like help smooth over some of the rougher edges of these. So, but yeah, like you're saying, like no matter how much is out there, I'm still greedy for more, even knowing that I'm never ever going to be able to play all of the RPGs on Switch that I want to play.
Right. I mean, like I'm never even going to be able to play all of the Final Fantasy games on the Switch that I would want to play. But that doesn't mean that I'm not like ravenous for like in particular more Final Fantasy games. But so I think that's one of the things that we need to get out of the way right away. I feel like there are 3 big obvious ones here, all from the Super Nintendo, that should be on Switch. They're not on Switch, and it's a crime, but let's just put them out here as table stakes. These games are Final Fantasy 2/4, Final Fantasy 3/6, and Chrono Trigger.
And, we've seen Final Fantasy 4 and 6 on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition.
No, just 3/6. 4 is not.
Oh, okay. But Chrono Trigger is
also not.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so. And Chrono Trigger it frequently has like mobile ports,
and had a PC port
and
like
had,
within
had
the
a
past
PC
5
port
years.
not that long ago. And Final Fantasy 4/2. I mean, first of all, there's the after years as well. So there's like a sequel ish to Final Fantasy 4. And then there was the remake of it on DS all those years ago. So like they do keep kind of like churning that one, like resurfacing that one. And obviously there are the pixel remasters that have been coming out on mobile and PC over the last year. But there has not been any news or even whispers of them coming to consoles yet, even though like, why would they not?
Yeah, I mean, it is really surprising to me that Chrono Trigger hasn't made it to Switch, only because even if it's a bad version, it's still going to sell a ton of copies. I would buy it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they do need to make sure that it's not a bad version. One of the, I know, I understand the like, even if it's a bad version, but Final Fantasies 4, 5, 6, and Chrono Trigger were all released on the original PlayStation back in the day as part of these like Final Fantasy anthologies. Two separate collections, and I can't remember which was which and what their names were and which games were collected together. But I do know that because they were all Super Nintendo or Super Famicom games now suddenly being put on disc, that they had these horrendous load times, so that like anytime you opened a menu or went into a battle, there was like an honest to God like 10 seconds of just like waiting for it to happen, whereas obviously the cartridges would happen immediately. So they do have to make sure that they're versions that work. You know what I mean?
And I do think, yes. And I do think that my memory is that when Chrono Trigger was originally released for PC, it was not a great port.
Yeah.
And so they had to do some work to like patch it and fix it.
And Square Enix has this weird tendency these days to mess up the fonts in their games. Like, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, but they have this very like narrow font that is not in like the 16-bit aesthetic. It's just like an ultra slick, but too small to read font. Like it just like optimize it for TVs, right? And also like, why not have the text in the same format as and maybe it's just more restrictive, or that is probably what it is that's a spacing timing thing.
That's so weird to me that
Yeah.
Final Fantasy, the font thing's super weird, because like it just seems like it would be obvious that you would want that to be optimized. But the Final Fantasy IV has not been released recently
Yeah.
on like Nintendo platforms is really weird to me.
I mean, here's the thing that is truly weirder, that Final Fantasy III is on the Super NES Switch Online. It's incredible. I'm glad it's there. It's for me, a formative part of the Super NES library. But like, Square Enix has not been playing ball with like putting their stuff, especially their legacy stuff, on like subscription or like free stuff. Like, it's weird to me that they did do it, and maybe it's because they also had the original Final Fantasy on the NES Classic Edition. But yeah, it's just it's weird to me that they're playing ball at all. Mark, we've come up with a couple RPGs that have not made their way to Switch. Did you put any parameters on yourself?
So no, I did not. These are, although it ended up being, I think, all games that have shown up on a Nintendo platform in some form or another, and the majority of these I have not played, and that is part of the reason why I want them.
Yeah,
is because they're classic RPGs for the most part that I want to get my hands on.
Yeah, well, I assume at some point we are going to dip our toes into the Dragon Quest franchise, but there are so many of those that are like, weird to access in whatever format. Just they often get stranded on older hardware, and a lot of them don't get like localized right away or whatever. So there's a lot there. So I would say that I also didn't intentionally put any parameters on myself, but I think a lot of them are featured on Nintendo platforms at one point or another. Mark, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. I'm actually going to start with one that maybe one of the few that I have played that is on my list, and kind of a gimme, I feel like, but it is Paper Mario Thousand Year Door that was originally released for the Nintendo GameCube. So I recently replayed the original Paper Mario game that was released on Nintendo Switch Online for the Nintendo 64, and I really enjoyed it. It did open my eyes to the kind of like flaws of like Paper Mario, but also kind of like unlocked memories of playing Thousand Year Door and being like, oh yeah, there's quite a bit of backtracking in this, and the backtracking is not super fun.
Right.
But Paper Mario Thousand Year Door is really well regarded, and part of it is just because the little vignettes within it are so inventive and fun. Plus, the characters are just like a blast. You have so many like fun companions, like the punk Yoshi, like baby Yoshi. There's this whole sequence where you're basically like a luchador and you are fighting your way up. There's a mystery on a train. Like it's just every such a good example of what Paper Mario can be.
Yeah, like that sense of humor and just like the richness of character.
And I have liked, I mean, really, the only Paper Mario game that I've played since then, all the way through, is Paper Mario The Origami King that was released on Switch a couple of years ago. And I really liked The Origami King. I had a really good time with it. But it's difficult to not compare other Paper Mario games to Thousand Year Door.
Yeah. I mean, then that sort of is like there's always a little like divide, even from the beginning, between Paper Mario and like other, like a sort of classic JRPG. And I feel like that divide starts to widen after Thousand Year Door and never stops widening. So I just feel like that Thousand Year Door is where it's like still kind of playing by the rules of what makes regular RPGs fun and engaging and like feel deep, but while also being, Paper Mario.
Yeah.
I never played Thousand Year Door.
It is, I mean, it's really good. I am sure that I haven't played it at this point for probably like 15 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I revisited like I did the original Paper Mario, it is a game from like 20 years ago.
Right.
Like I think the
Right.
flaws would reveal itself, but the strengths of Paper Mario, of the Paper Mario franchise, so even the lesser entries, which like include, like, in my opinion, like Super Paper Mario, I didn't love, but
Right.
the strengths of even the lesser games are the writing and the characters and the funny, just like throwaway dialogue.
Yeah.
And Thousand Year Door has all of that. It has amazing characters, has amazing writing, plus really just like strong, like you were saying, core RPG mechanics.
Yes.
And it'd be the last time that Paper Mario was, to my mind, ever like a real like RPG.
Right. Not to be too snobby about RPGs, but like I agree with you. And I think you and I are maybe a strange case for this, because I think we like our RPGs to be real RPGs, but we don't want them to be so real that they're like Xenoblade games. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Like, look, I don't want my numbers to be tiny little baby numbers, but I also don't want to deal 10,000 damage,
Yeah.
All right. So I'm also going to, for my first selection here, I'm also going to choose a Nintendo published game. One from not that long ago, Fire Emblem Awakening. There is one real Fire Emblem game on the Switch, and it's Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's a great game. It does such a good job of like recontextualizing how you deal with your units and how you build relationships with them. But the romance element of previous Fire Emblem games, and particularly Fire Emblem Awakenings, not present, right? You're the teacher. You shouldn't be romancing your students. I think we can agree. But you do take them to tea. So I don't know. I don't know what's happening in Three Houses. But in Awakening, the game is built on a time travel mechanic, right? So your characters pair up and have children, and your children visit you from a doomed future, and help you battle the evil that ruins their world, right? And the way that you build relationships in any Fire Emblem game is by making them do like little things together in between missions, little like side game, mini game sorts of things, but also just like have them fight together. If you have units fight side by side, they will both assist each other in battle and sort of level up their relationship to each other. And when you level them up high enough, they can have kids together, and like that affects the stats of the characters. I don't know. It's just it's a fascinating thing to be building relationships with an eye towards what their offspring are going to be able to like do for you, and just like knowing. Like, oh, okay, like this character is going to have this child and this character is going to have this child. If I pair them up, then then these two will be siblings. So they'll have like a deeper bond when they're together. And just all of it, the character designs in Awakening are just awesome. They're, I would say, they're on par with the great character designs in Three Houses. Like Three Houses has so many like unique, sort of like vibrant, evocative character designs, and Awakenings does it as good or better. And while the game is not that far in the rearview mirror, it's a 3DS game. It's still like 10 years old or something at this point. So yeah, like I want it to be on Switch.
That'd be fun. I've never played Fire Emblem Awakening before.
It's great.
My next pick is a Wii game that was released in Japan in 2011 and finally made it to North America in 2012 after much work, and that is The Last Story.
Tell me about The Last Story.
Okay, so it was developed by Mistwalker, but published by Nintendo. Mistwalker I think still is the company of the original creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi. And he, had done Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey. Blue Dragon was on the Xbox 360.
Oh, yes.
Microsoft
Okay,
really
sure,
making
yes.
a play, for Japan. And so the idea was to create this very Dragon Quest-esque game. Sakaguchi not really has ever really found like a ton of success post Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
But The Last Story is supposed to be really, really good. It features music from Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu. And this was a game that, when it was released in Japan, was well regarded. Is now considered a kind of a lost classic because while Nintendo published it in Japan and I believe Europe, they did not bring it to the US. This was part of Project Rainfall, which you may recall or Operation Rainfall. I can't remember which. I think it's Operation Rainfall, which was basically like there was The Last Story and Pandora's Tower, which were games that Nintendo published in Japan and for Wii. And
was it like an attempt to like legitimize the platform or like reclaim core audience?
So Operation Rainfall was a fan-driven thing.
Okay.
Where Nintendo was not. This was the end of the Wii era when like Nintendo for a long time. At the end of the Wii era, it was like a game drought. I think internally they had probably moved their focus to HD development, which was like all companies saw a huge jarring shift when trying to shift to HD, but Nintendo did it a generation after everybody else.
Right.
Part of the reason, like stuff that affected the Wii U. And so since they had put all their resources to that, the Wii just kind of like dried up. There were not a ton of releases for the Wii, but they had these games in Japan that, like Nintendo fans in America were like, why are you not just localizing these and bringing them? So it was a fan campaign to get some of those games over. I think Xseed ended up releasing The Last Story in the US. So this was a Nintendo like published game everywhere except North America, where a third party ended up bringing it over.
I mean, that's the weirdest part, is that Nintendo would let another party publish. Like,
yeah.
It's
difficult to remember now, 10 years ago, but the end of the Wii era, like beginning of the Wii U era, was a very challenging time for Nintendo because the Wii had lost all of its momentum essentially.
Yes.
And they were teeing up the Wii U, which would have a tortured launch. The 3DS had just come out and also had a tortured launch.
Right.
And so
the 3DS would eventually right itself, basically.
Kind of because they like
kind of because they had to, yeah.
Yeah, they like
people didn't want to make games for the Wii U because they weren't selling there, yeah.
So The Last Story, supposed to be an amazing RPG. I have never played, and it's incredibly difficult and expensive to get today because it was on the Wii, so it was never available digitally. It was released by Xseed. It was not like a big Nintendo release. It happened at the end of the Wii's lifetime, so it's not like there were a ton of copies that just flooded game stores and are floating around.
Yeah.
This is one I would love to play. This is one I'd love to get my hands on.
That's a good pull. I would also love to get my hands on that game. Mark, can I go outside of the world of Nintendo? I want to talk about a game that was only released on PlayStation back in the day. Had a sequel and then has really just been a dormant property for 2 decades. and I'm referring to the Square Enix classic Parasite Eve. Mark, are you familiar with Parasite Eve?
I've never played it. I'm most familiar with Parasite Eve through its like pseudo sequel, the what was it, like the Third Birthday or something like that?
Oh, I don't know the Third Birthday.
I might have the name wrong, but I've never played it, but I'm kind of familiar with Parasite Eve.
So Parasite Eve originally drew me in as a Resident Evil obsessed kid because it had like the look of the models in Parasite Eve looked like the early Resident Evil characters to me. And it has like a modern setting, and it's spooky ghosts and like cops that are fighting spooky ghosts. Yeah, are they actually ghosts? No, but neither were the zombies. So like, hang with me here. But it also had a turn-based combat, like Final Fantasy style system that was kind of a disappointment to me when I first tried to play it as a kid because I wanted it to be Resident Evil-y. But now I'm like, no. Like I want to get into that. I want to play through this kind of stuff and like be shooting guns at mutant dogs and stuff like that. The game has this impossibly cool opening sequence. Mark, have you ever seen this thing?
I don't think so.
So it takes place at like an opera. And you're like a member of the NYPD. You're at this big opera house. Your character is wearing like a ball gown, but is also like strapped, like has her gun on her. And you're in the audience, and this the diva is singing, and it's a very like Fifth Element kind of scene until people start spontaneously combusting, bursting into flames, and it's clear the performer is still singing, maybe is making all of this happen, and the whole building goes up in flames.
Whoa.
And you have to battle your way out as these like
That sounds so cool.
creatures like come upon you. It's a very like it's lumpy as heck. I've never beaten this game, and I'm sure it's not very well balanced. But like it just has that incredible opening sequence. I want to know what other cool secrets are in this game.
Yeah, this is a series wrapped in so much mystery to me. Do you know what? So I looked it up. The Third Birthday was a game that was released in 2010 in Japan, and it was for the PSP, and it is both the third entry in the Parasite Eve series, but it is also just like apparently a spin-off with very loose connections to the story of the first two.
Okay.
So I always associate Parasite Eve, and now I don't know if they're related at all, but I always associate it with a game called, it's like The Bouncer or something like that.
Okay,
and it's another like Square game.
Yeah, Bouncer was PS2 era though.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Parasite Eve was actually, if memory serves me, and it doesn't, Parasite Eve was a late era PlayStation game.
Original PlayStation. Yeah, I don't know why I associate the two with each other. Maybe it was just because I feel like the PlayStation era was such a kind of crazy time for Square.
Yeah.
Where you just got like so many, maybe because games were not as expensive to develop as they are now, but they just took a bunch of shots where they're like, oh, we're just going to do this weird like Bouncer video game, or here's a series based on this not Japanese novel, Parasite Eve.
You know what's interesting is I've pulled up the just like the box art for Parasite Eve and Bouncer, and they're not dealing in dissimilar color palettes. And like, well, the character design in Bouncer is a lot more like JRPG anime crazy. They're both like seemingly set in like a modern day sort of setting, right?
They're directed by the same person.
Whoa!
Takashi Tokita.
Whoa!
Maybe that's why
Maybe that's the connection.
I associate them with each other.
Are you saying you somehow intuited that?
I don't know. I must have heard it on like Retronauts or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I definitely did not know that, but that man, what a crazy era for SquareSoft.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like SquareSoft and Square Enix frequently has crazy eras where it's just like, why are they putting out what they put out? but that's sort of what I love about them. Like they have a brand, but the brand is so wild and so broad that like they can take these really weird swings.
So my next pick is maybe tiptoeing into Xenoblade Chronicles territory,
Mark,
but
how dare you, Mark?
how am I going to know unless I'm ever able to play this game?
Yes.
And that game is, of course, Baten Kaitos Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean, released in 2003 for the Nintendo GameCube, developed by our friends Monolith Soft and Tricrescendo, and published by Namco.
Yeah. This is a what was this released on? GameCube?
GameCube. It's 2003. So I always think of it as like a late GameCube release, but it wasn't. It was like actually fairly early in its life.
Yeah, this is a game that neither of us have played at all, and really only know by reputation.
Right. I remember like reading, and this was actually the era where I was reading Nintendo Power, and I remember Baten Kaitos getting quite a bit of coverage, and reading like the previews and the reviews, being excited for it, but never picked it up. It's a card-based RPG, which I don't have a ton of familiarity with, like card-based combat systems and RPGs. I don't play a lot of games like that.
Yeah, no, I mean I definitely don't either. I think the only card-based RPG I played was that bad Mario one for Color Splash, where all the combat in there is card-based.
And I dabbled with Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, which I if that's the Game Boy Advance one, which is also has like a kind of like card-based combat system. But
let me ask you this:
yeah,
we'll get back to Baten Kaitos in a second. Did you put any Kingdom Hearts games on this list? Because they're sort of on the Switch.
I didn't put it on this list. One of the weird things about Kingdom Hearts is I should really like it.
Yeah, but you don't.
It should be like really like a Square Enix RPG.
Yes.
JRPG crossed with, like Disney properties, like.
Right. But it's also like kind of a little bit of an action game, which is also your jam.
Yeah, I should really like it, but have never really had any desire to get into the series.
Well, it's just got such impenetrable lore. We don't need to.
But you could start from the beginning.
Yeah, but then you still have to go through all the lore. Look, I've listened to enough podcasts from people who know, who have played all the games in the series, who are big fans, who have no idea what's going on. I have no faith in my own ability to discern what's going on.
But that's okay. I mean, I watched Twin Peaks: The Return.
Sure.
Knowing what's going on is sometimes overrated.
That's true. You are making a lot of sense, Mark. Do we need to play through the Kingdom Hearts games?
Man,
we wouldn't do it on Switch.
It would, we would. Because it would be so much more appealing to me if I could pay $40 or whatever for even the digital version that I owned.
Yes,
something about it being the cloud version.
Yeah,
and I can just buy it for $2 on any other platform.
Right. Yes. There are the latency issues, which were a bummer to me, and also just getting disconnects, which is just sort of a feature of cloud-based gaming on Switch, which is too bad. Because otherwise, I think we probably would have committed some sort of effort to playing these games.
That's right. You did it to yourself, Square Enix.
You did it to yourself, Square Enix. Baten Kaitos.
So. Another thing that I think is really fun about this, or looks really fun about this game, is that they seem to have fun with the aesthetic. I've seen some screenshots and some levels where it has this really cartoony, almost Day of the Dead, Pinata kind of aesthetic that is just really different and interesting. And so your regular characters are running through this world and interacting in it, and that's just one area. A lot of it still has that. I mean, honestly, what I would say very similar to Xenoblade Chronicles, type look to it. That very classic JRPG look. But yeah, this is a series that's always intrigued me. Really, the GameCube era is one full of mystery.
Yeah.
Because of all of my libraries, growing up as a kid, we probably had the least number of games for the GameCube that weren't a lot of licensed games or Need for Speed or just a lot of we had a lot of that kind of stuff, but I didn't have a lot of JRPGs. I didn't have like a lot of those games in the GameCube era, and
Yeah,
it just
well,
feels like I just want it.
yeah, well, and this was sort of the wrong era for Nintendo and JRPGs, especially on home console. The opposite is true on the handheld side, right? Um, uh, it always is, but like Pokemon was the biggest thing in the world, and like Square was making games for the GBA. We have the Golden Sun games there. Like there's just and Fire Emblem games and Advance Wars. Like all of that's over there. But on the console side, yeah, the Nintendo 64 and GameCube just like didn't have RPGs because it just made more sense to put them on like regular sized discs instead of trying to jam them onto a cart or onto a tiny little GameCube disc. My next pull is not going to be the very trolling Quest 64, which I was going to submit it as a total troll move. Do you think Quest 64 comes to the Nintendo 64 Switch Online?
I could see it. I actually genuinely could see it if it's not tied up in a bunch of like rights issues.
Yeah, well, I just closed the window I had open for it because I decided not to.
I have never played Quest 64.
I owned Quest 64. One of the reasons I bought a Nintendo 64 originally was because there was a blurb in Nintendo Power about Final Fantasy VII come in development for Nintendo 64, and I was a big Final Fantasy kid at that time and was like, oh, I need to go there, right?
Right.
And obviously I was rewarded with, Mario 64 and like a million other great games. But like the reason then that I bought a PlayStation was to play Final Fantasy VII. So I was hurting for an RPG. And when Quest 64 came out in 1998, I was there. Like I bought it like first thing. I was excited for this game. It is a real bummer. And therefore it's not actually on my list. But like the combat in the game is so bizarre. You can see the enemies out in the field. You engage them in combat, and then you're in like an octagon, like on the field, but like lines are drawn around like your field of play, and you like run around to try to avoid attacks from the enemy. And then use the C buttons to like select magic attacks to use, and then otherwise you can like swing up and like hit them with your staff. And you're just one character. You don't have a party or anything like that. And
there's
just
no
real
party.
Rough. There's no party. You're just one dude.
I believe that in the Nintendo 64 era.
Yeah, well, they had to like minimize the number of models on screen at any given time. If it's you and the enemy, like they're maxing out on polygons.
I can genuinely name two, off the top of my head, I can name two RPGs.
Wow.
For Nintendo 64, and it's Quest 64 and Paper Mario.
Yeah.
I can't name another one.
Oh my God. Yeah, well, because did Square Enix publish a game on Nintendo 64?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Well, I don't think Squaresoft did, and I don't think Enix did.
Yeah, great point. I mean, if we count Mega Man Legends as an RPG, the Mega Man 64, which is a port of Mega Man Legends, maybe that counts? I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that's not Square Enix, it's a Capcom
But that's
game,
so crazy to have like an entire console generation where the two of us are struggling to name any RPGs for the system.
Mark, that's not my pick here. My pick here is not Quest 64. My pick here is a Nintendo DS game from Marvelous and Grasshopper Manufacture called
Contact?
Yes. Is this on your list?
It's not on my list, but this is another game that like, it intrigues me so much.
Yes. That was my relationship with it as well. A game that I found mostly impenetrable as I was trying to play it when it first came out. It takes pretty generous advantage of the dual screen functionality in that the top screen is like a pixelated 16-bit like professor character who is talking to you, the player, and then you guide the hero on the bottom screen. And so like you're sort of indirectly controlling him on this, and it's another adventure that takes place in a seemingly modern day setting. And you're like laying down like stickers and like traps and stuff to like either aid him or attack the enemies. You're not commanding him to attack specific enemies. You just like get him close and equip him, and like he does the rest. But it's got a very like alienating, weird story. Like the game is just by its very interface, it's meant to make you feel disconnected from the protagonist. You're not controlling him, and in fact, you're not even making decisions. This like professor guy is. So it's a weird sort of like trippy experiment, which you would expect nothing less from Marvelous and Grasshopper. And just a really cool, weird, trippy game. And I wish I could play it again. I want to play it on Switch.
Well, speaking of kind of like weird, trippy experiments, my next pick comes from the Game Boy Advance. It's 2003's Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand.
Ah, this is a what's his name? Fell out of my head.
Kojima.
Yeah, Hideo Kojima. There we
Yeah,
go.
he's a producer of it, I
Yes.
believe. So it comes from Konami. Basically, the gimmick of the game is that you are playing Django, a vampire hunter who uses a weapon called the like solar gun, the Gun del Sol. And the way that you like get ammo for it or charge it is that there's a sensor on the back of the Game Boy Advance cartridge that is powered by the sun. It can sense, when it's out in the sunlight.
It's just like a tiny little solar panel.
Yeah, exactly. And so the gimmick is that when you start the game, it syncs with like your current time, and when the sun is out, if you have like the energy built up, then you can use the gun for the vampire hunter. And then at night when you're out of energy, you can't like attack enemies. You have to avoid them. You have to find other ways to advance. And it's such a weird, cool, kind of like gimmicky premise that I'm bummed that I never experienced it. This is just this is one of those things that like, is it fun? I don't know, but it's such a cool idea.
I totally agree with you. And the thing that makes me like further bummed that like it probably couldn't make sense on Switch is that Switch doesn't even have a camera on it. Like most other, the recent Nintendo handhelds and obviously your phones have cameras on them so they can sense the presence of light. But like the Switch can't.
I mean,
could
they use the it
does
sense
auto-dim.
it auto dims, but that's just like brightness. It wouldn't necessarily be able to tell like the light. I don't know. Maybe there's a way they could do it, like the IR sensor on the right Joy-Con or whatever.
You got to,
if you're like pointing at a light source. Yeah.
I always find that kind of thing so funny. I was playing my PlayStation Vita on a plane at one point, playing the Uncharted game on there, which Golden Abyss is the name of it. And that game is notorious for having like too many of the Vita's like special features like functioned in it. And one of the things I had to do was hold a piece of paper up to the light to see like some pattern showing through it and then match that up on the walls or whatever, some puzzle like that. And I'm on a plane and I've got my Vita and I'm trying to like hold it up to the reading light, but like just couldn't pull it off. So I had to stop playing. But not before looking like an absolute maniac holding my game console up to the lights on the ceiling.
Yeah, not as cool as you'd look holding like trying to shine your Joy-Con to get the IR sensor.
With the Joy-Con, you could at least do that like surreptitiously, right? It fits in your hand. Like, you just like hold it up there.
Right,
like,
you're just pretending you're stretching or
like adjusting the blowing thing. What is that called? What is that little nozzle called?
A vent?
Yeah, I don't know. Mark, what a great pull. I'm going to go for like a real one now. Like one that I like genuinely want to play. I'm angry that I haven't played. Is a game that is like legendary and just supposed to be great. I'm talking, of course, about Dragon Quest V. It is the game that introduces, a couple things, right? One is that there's a sort of Pokemon-esque mechanic where you are capturing or taming Dragon Quest monsters and making them fight for you. But this is also the game where it takes place over like generations. So you your character is, has a relationship, has a wife, and you have kids that are. Who they are and what they're able to do is determined by what you do earlier in the hero's life. It is, reputationally one of the best Dragon Quest games, and it's been available on DS and PlayStation 2. It was originally a Super Famicom game. I would love a re-release on Switch that just has all of those versions like packaged into one. It's just there aren't enough Dragon Quest games available on Switch right now. It's 1, 2, 3, and 11, and Builders and Builders 2, and there are a handful of other ones, but man, 5 just has such a reputation that I just want to play it.
Yeah, 5 has a really kind of unique twist in the story that I won't spoil, but the way that it handles kind of the expectations of the hero's journey and the hero's arc. There's just a moment in it when you're like, oh, that's so cool. I can't what a cool kind of take on that hero's journey, and the fact that it is cross generations is such an important part of it. I would love for the Super Famicom version, but I would love for the DS version to make it to Switch. There's so many those Dragon Quest remakes. I bought Dragon Quest 7 for the 3DS, and that was the first time I think it had ever been localized outside of Japan, because it's a tome. It's such a long game that they tightened up and changed quite a bit, is my understanding, for the 3DS remake, and I was really excited to play it. Have never actually done it. But there are, I completely agree with Dragon Quest V. My Dragon Quest pick that I have on my list is Dragon Quest 9, Sentinels of the Starry Sky, which was originally released for the Nintendo DS. My first Dragon Quest game that I played all the way through, and I played it solo. So one of the unique things about Dragon Quest 9 is it was possible to play it with people.
Yes.
It's designed to be a multiplayer game. I didn't experience it that way. I soloed the entire thing, but it was such a revelation to me, and such a fun introduction to what the virtues of Dragon Quest. Just great characters, great really good music,
incredible design.
Incredible design. And that I think
those Dragon Quest monsters, gimme. They're so cute.
Yeah. And just kind of a fun, uplifting, really just a good time.
Yes.
You just have a good time, a smile on your face while you're playing Dragon Quest 9. And I think it would benefit so much from, honestly, probably a remake in the modern era.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe it doesn't have to be full 3D, maybe some HD 2D, however you want to present it.
It is kind of 3D even on
the DS. But it's I don't know if there's any up-resing of the Nintendo DS that would salvage it. But
I mean, that's the real bummer about 9 and the remakes of 7 and 8 on 3DS, that it seems like it would be so such a no-brainer to port them over to modern consoles, but the graphical fidelity of an asset on the DS or the 3DS, the gulf between that and the same asset on HD console is just enormous.
Well, especially for 8, because 8 was originally a PlayStation 2 game.
Yeah.
And a pretty expansive PlayStation 2 game. So they kind of had the graphic fidelity of the 3DS version. It's impressive that they got it all on there.
Right.
But the PS2 game is, the better version.
Right.
As far as graphics go. But 9, I think it would be so cool to give it a modern spin. Just make the online connectivity, the modern online connectivity that we all expect nowadays. 10, I know that we're never going to get it in outside of Japan. Just
we're not even going to get the offline version, which bums me out.
It's just not going to happen. But 9 already localized.
Yep.
A lot of that work that sometimes prevents them being released here has been done. And so just give it an upgrade. That would be so fun to be able to play Dragon Quest with friends.
Do you think there will ever be a time when, because Dragon Quest has such a like vaunted reputation in Japan, and sells so well in Japan, but the reason that it gets so like non-reliably localized is that they don't sell that well in the States or abroad, kind of anywhere. Do you think there will ever be a day when when we like catch up and they're like, oh yeah, it only makes sense to make these games available to people because I mean, you can't play 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 outside of Japan on modern consoles.
Right.
That's so many games. That's most of the games.
Well, and I feel like part of the problem is that, so many of them for such a long time were not released here at all.
Yes.
So it's like 9, Nintendo made a really big deal out of 9. They had commercials with Seth Green. And it sold well. I think it sold over like 1 million copies outside of Japan.
This is Austin Powers 2 era Seth Green, okay?
No,
it's later. It's later.
No, it's later.
It's later. Okay. This is Robot Chicken Seth
era.
Green.
Yeah.
Did I say Robot Chicken or did I say Robot Seth? What did I say?
I think you said Robot Chicken.
Okay, great.
So it sold well, but then like we didn't get 10, and so there was a big gap where all we were getting were these DS and 3DS, like remakes,
and sort of late in the 3DS life cycle too, especially 7, right? Or
well,
was it 7 or 8? One of them came really late.
Yeah, it must have been 8.
One of them came late enough that you bought it while we were recording this show.
That was 7.
Okay,
so I think they both might have come like. I can't remember for sure.
Sure. Mark, I won't hold you to it.
maybe 7 had been out for a while when I bought it. I don't know that I bought it, but yes, I remember us talking about it. But yeah, so it's like 9 was released, but then between that and 11, the only things that were released were remakes of games that like people didn't have any affinity for here because it was the first time.
Right.
Like 8, maybe people had bought it for the PlayStation 2, but it wasn't like a big hit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like it's a weird franchise because it is so vaunted in Japan, but its history in the US has been so patchy. I think the saving grace for the Dragon Quest series and why I do think we'll continue to see like new entries localized here is just how big gaming in general has become and how international it is, that I think, like Dragon Quest 12, it would not surprise me if they are kind of developing with a worldwide audience in mind.
Yeah, I would think that you're right. I mean, especially considering 11 was successful here, but not, it's not in like on a blockbuster scale.
And it took a ton of effort to get it to the level it did.
A ton of effort, yeah. Well, and like it's so much time, like the original version of it came out and then the S version came out on Switch, and that was they basically had to rebuild it and then release the S version on the other platforms, which must have been like I don't even know. Did they just like rebuild it or go back to the whatever happened, however they built these things? Like Mark says, it's through like great pain and treasure, certainly, that it took them to bring these games out. But I think the reputation is now set for the next Dragon Quest game to be the one that people pick up. I don't know if that will happen, but man, I want it to.
I don't think it'll ever be like a huge phenomenon.
Yeah.
Here, like I don't think it's ever going to do. I mean, never say never, but I don't think it, soon is going to do like Final Fantasy numbers. Yeah. But hopefully, it can sell consistently well enough that we don't have to be like, is this going to come out? Like, are we going to get Dragon Quest 12?
Right.
That we don't have to question it anymore.
I think we are going to get 12. It still bums me out that we're never going to get 10 offline. But what are you going to do? Okay, speaking of 10, Mark, we are on our 10th and presumably final entry. But if we want to add a couple more, we are totally welcome to. Here's a game I don't even know that I necessarily want to see it come to any other platform, but I do want to talk about it. The Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. This is a RPG featuring Sonic the Hedgehog, developed by BioWare. BioWare at the height of their powers during the Mass Effect era. It's a Sonic the Hedgehog RPG. Look, should I have said Super Mario RPG? Because that is a game that is missing from the library. Maybe. Should I have brought up Secret of Evermore because it's a game I won't shut up about? Yes. However, Mark, let's talk about Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood.
This was a Nintendo DS game, right?
Yes,
and
that's
the
right.
thing that's so weird to me about it is I want the oral history of how this came about.
Yes.
It's a BioWare game
Mhm.
of a Sega franchise
Yes.
on a Nintendo platform.
Right.
And the game, by all accounts, is fairly mediocre. Didn't review very well. You don't
Yep.
even hear people talking about it
Yes.
nowadays. I don't even know if it's sold that well. But its existence is such a crazy anomaly that I want the oral history. I want to understand the genesis of this game.
Yeah. Pun not intended, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, I never got my hands on this game. It is one that just always sort of like looms in my imagination as like, what? Yeah, why not a Sonic RPG, right? Like, put your mascots in RPGs. We like Mario stuff in RPGs. That's fine. Give me a Kirby RPG. I think it'd be fun.
It's for as much as like as popular as Sonic is,
Yes.
and how it basically like remains the mascot for Sega. It is so weird to me how underutilized. Why are we not getting some sort of Sega game or Sonic game every year?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we probably are. They're just like mobile games.
Sonic Soccer,
Yeah.
Sonic. Like you're saying, like put them in other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be fun. All right, we've come up with 10 RPGs that should really be on Switch already. Mark, have we left out? Are there anything missing from this list that we should bring up?
Can I mention two real quick?
Yes.
Skies of Arcadia.
Yep.
Never played it. Know it only by reputation. I know that there is a GameCube version. Give me either one. I think they both sold really poorly. And then the second one is one that I almost have an adversarial relationship with, and I feel like I need to play it again just so I can best it. And that's Final Fantasy Tactics Advance for the Game Boy Advance.
Yes.
I, for whatever reason, at the time it came out, I can't tell you if this game is truly difficult, but I could not wrap my head around it. And so, but now I'm like, I think if I played it again, I could best it this time. And I really want that opportunity.
I will also add two more onto this list just quickly in the final moments here. Let's bundle those Golden Sun games. The first two Golden Sun games that are sort of like mirror images of each other. You play as one character and then you play as it's almost like a Gaiden game. Let's put those on there. I don't love the Golden Sun games. I know people go to bat for them, but they seem just sort of like bog standard turn-based RPGs. Someone change my mind if you think the Golden Sun games are worth playing right into us. But the other game that I want to shout out here is a game for the Super NES called The Seventh Saga, which was an Enix game before Square and Enix combined. That is a game where you take on the role of one of 7 individual heroes. Heroes is maybe a loose term for it. Some of them are straight villains, and they're racing to get treasure in a world where there's evil abound. And you seemingly randomly encounter the other 7 heroes or the other 6 heroes from the one that you pick, and you can recruit them, or they try to battle you. And they can leave you at any time. They can betray you at any time. It uses an insane amount of Mode 7 graphics. Like when you go into a battle, you're walking around the world map, and then the battle starts, and it takes the image of the world map and spins it around, and then you're just playing on a distorted version of the world map while fighting things. It's very difficult and very slow. But I remember the characters all being cool. There's a knight. There's a priest who's a healing cleric. There's an alien who uses fire magic. There's a robot. It's just wild. It's pulling from every possible direction. It's just nuts. All right, those are 14 RPGs. Mark, let's close this out. Did we leave any great RPGs on the table? Probably left a bunch.
What are those Nintendo 64 RPGs that were?
I don't think there are any.
that we're missing. There has to be at least one more.
Did you ever think about putting? And look, we're not counting Pokemon Stadium or whatever. Although, was there another Pokemon kind of thing for? I don't know. And look, there are also a bunch of like Fire Emblem games that could be on here. The Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn would both be cool to see coming over to Switch. A lot. There's a lot here. But let us know your favorites that we didn't mention. Write into us, Nintendo Cartridge Society
at gmail.com.
That is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any place where you can type in the words Nintendo Cartridge Society and get our podcast. If you like the episode, please share it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you can share anything. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell, and the show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying thank you for listening.
I'm Brian Husky. I'm bald.
And I'm Charlie Sanders, and I'm also bald. And we host Bald Talk on the Campfire Media Network.
Bald Talk is the podcast where two bald comedians talk to anyone bald about being bald.
But this show isn't just for baldies, Brian. Heroes will love it too.
Bald Talk gets into vulnerability, vanity, insecurity, and self-acceptance, reminding us that we all have our respective bald spots. Not that bald spots are a bad thing.
No way. I mean, my entire head is one big bald spot.
It is one huge, beautiful bald spot, Charlie.
Get Bald Talk on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, I have like a little bit of hair, but not like you. Like, you're really bald.
I'm truly bald.
Great. I mean, it's
I'm
great.
balder than you.
You are balder than me.
Only on Bald Talk. Campfire.